Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Catholic Table Talk, where everything Catholic is on the table. I'm your host, William Sabra, joining you again at my home studio. Joined this episode by my pastor, who became my pastor in 2017, I believe, right?
2000, it was either 2017 or 2018.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, he's been with the parishes from at my parishes for a couple of years now. His name is
hmm
Father Gabriel Waltz, and yeah. So, Father Gabriel, thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sauber. Uh, yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's good to have you here. Um, Today's topic is modesty. Now, this was sent in by a friend of mine, so thank you very much. It really helps the show. If you have any other, if anyone has show requests, please feel free to put them in the comments or message me on Facebook or email the show. So, my friend's mostly his most comment was, "What is the overall Catholic view of modesty?"
Yeah. So for starting out here, what I'm going to do is, if you can see this here, got the Catechism of the Catholic Church. On my screen, it looks like it's written backwards. I hope that isn't the case.
Look,
But is it written backwards on your screen too?
oh,
Okay,
looks
good,
good.
good, awesome. So I'm gonna take the if you look in the very back, if you have a Catechism of the Catholic Church, you look in the very back of the book. It's
Okay,
got these indices, the index of different topics and things. And so in the very back section here, it covers the subject of modesty, and it says modesty of the body, modesty, the definition of, purity requires, and as a sign of human dignity. And we're just going to go right to the definition section here. So paragraph 2521 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church says that purity requires modesty. Opening line, purity requires modesty, and that's significant. An integral part of temperance. So temperance is the virtue by which I have the right amount of something, not an excess, either of too little or too much. Modesty protects the intimate center of the person. It means refusing to unveil what should remain hidden. It is ordered to chastity to those, to whose sensitivity it bears witness. It guides how one looks at others and behaves toward them in conformity with the dignity of persons and their solidarity. The next paragraph goes on, modesty protects the mystery of persons and their love. It encourages patience and moderation in loving relationships. It requires that the conditions for the definitive giving and commitment of man and woman to one another be fulfilled. Modesty is decency. It inspires one's choice of clothing. It keeps silence or reserve where there is evident risk of unhealthy curiosity. It is discreet. And it goes on. It goes on for a couple more paragraphs here. I mean, maybe it'd be helpful. There's just two more paragraphs. I'll maybe
yeah,
just kind of
go
finish
ahead.
through with these last two paragraphs here, talking about modesty, and then we can talk about it a little bit more. So paragraph 25-23 says, there is a modesty of the feelings as well as of the body. It protests, for example, against voyeuristic explorations of the human body in certain advertisements, or against the solicitations of certain media that go too far in the exhibition of intimate things. Modesty inspires a way of life which makes it possible to resist the allurements of fashion and the pressures of prevailing ideologies. Then 25-24 says, the forms taken by modesty vary from one culture to another. Everywhere, however, modesty exists as an intuition of the spiritual dignity proper to man. It is born with the awakening consciousness of being a subject. Teaching modesty to children and adolescents means awakening in them respect for the human person. So the opening line, those first three sentences, purity requires modesty. And then the last line here, teaching modesty to children and adolescents means awakening in them respect for the human person. I think these are just really key to understanding, like, what are we talking about when we talk about modesty? All kind of woven through that whole, those 4 paragraphs of the catechism here, we kind of see a reflection, kind of chewing on the
Mhm.
topic here a little bit in kind of some different ways, and it goes into some different aspects of modesty. But it's about purity. It's about purity,
Right.
and it's about awakening a respect. Right, right. So like, we're looking to the good and the dignity of the person, not settling with just the facade, or sort of isolating that dignity to the side, and then just focusing on some particular aspect, namely, I mean, in this particular case, the physical beauty of a particular individual, to the neglect of their dignity as a person.
Right.
So,
So
yeah,
so that would that be considered looking like lust then? Would that
that's that's
that's
that's
what?
a huge part of it. That's a huge
Okay.
part of it, right?
Right.
So Jesus says in the Gospels, if you look at a woman with lust,
Hmm.
you've committed sin against, you've committed adultery against her. Like, he puts looking at a woman with lust, looking at another person with lust, in the same category as adultery.
Right.
So it's not the same, it's not a sin of the same gravity, but it is
Okay.
a sin of the same family, right? So like, if I were to look at a woman lustfully, I've participated in this, in a sin that's within this, it's moving in the direction of adultery. It's not just moving in the direction, it's part of that same, it's a lesser cooperation in that same kind of sin.
Right.
But it's a lesser participation, right? The actual act of adultery would be the grave manifestation of the sin.
Hmm.
But as Jesus talks about elsewhere in the Gospels, what we let go unchecked in the heart eventually leads to outward manifestation on the outside. So if I allow myself to just yield into lust time and time again, it forms a disposition in my heart. Either I become a slave of that lust within my heart, or it might even make me prone and susceptible to falling into, if I get put in a certain kind of situation, I might become susceptible to falling into the deeper kind of sin in certain circumstances. So growing virtue is always important. And
Right.
here we have the virtues of chastity. It's talking about temperance, the catechism paragraphs here, all of the above.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, really love reading the Catechism of the Catholic Church. That's where you need to go if you need to learn something. So okay, so question 2, do like I guess I can rephrase the question a little bit, but do like priests do different priests have kind of different opinions of it? Like what can do, what can not do, I guess. If that makes sense.
Sure, sure. Yeah, oh yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. And I think I'll expand the um I'll expand the topic a little bit as well here, because I would say different priests and bishops will have different approaches to how they might address or not address the topic of modesty.
Right.
Typically, if I'm, for instance, like, when might this come up? If somebody is dressing, like, if there's a woman in a super low cut front shirt in the summertime or whatever shows up, um, or if a guy just comes into church with a muscle shirt on just because he's been working out all winter and he wants to show off his muscles and stuff, or whatever it might be. uh like, an approach that I might take would be to try to talk to that person on the side.
Right.
I know some priest friends of mine will do the talks on modesty during the winter when everybody's all bundled up and stuff, so that they don't essentially kind of make everybody look down at the person who's dressed immodestly at the church at the time.
True.
The downside of that for us, for instance, in our parishes here, is we have a number of folks who come up just in the summertime here. So parishes like ours, it doesn't really do work to do the talk in the wintertime, because a lot of the folks who are here in the summertime just aren't here in the wintertime. So
Exactly.
it's a little bit tricky in our situation. So I try to catch people one on one when I'm able to, and just kind of like explain it a little bit. if I'm going to do a talk about, or if I'm going to address the subject of modesty, I try not to do it in a way that like makes everybody kind of turn and stare at the obvious person that I'm clearly talking about, that I should,
Right.
everybody should be shaming this person right now and stuff. But at the same time, it's a really important topic to be breaching, because we're talking about all of that stuff that the catechism said just a moment ago. What is it getting at? Well, so we have the catechism's approach here, which is itself kind of sort of skipping across a larger tradition within the church. Or we can go into a subject about virtue. We can go into subjects about different aspects of the nature of love and personal love. Um, but then you have other priests and bishops who've addressed this same topic, like Pope Saint John Paul II, who his theology of the body is pretty well known nowadays.
Hmm.
And so John Paul II, his approach to this is phenomenological, which is like it's like, think of it kind of like a way of philosophy which begins from the experience of the person. So like I take tangible things that I can experience, I can smell them, touch them, feel them, so forth. The phenomenological approach would start from the phenomena and then kind of work back or work up, so to speak, to the ideal and to that which we're striving for. So John Paul II is going to look at our human experience, and he's going to kind of point to almost a Socratic way of kind of like, it's not exactly a dialogue, but it's I mean, the phenomenological approach is not the same thing as Socrates. So anybody
Okay.
who's watching it, I apologize. I just did a big no there. But at the same time, though, it has this unique approach where there's kind of a scaling up of the understanding, right? So I'm learning the nature of the dignity of the person from the starting point of experience. Essentially, is kind of what phenomena. I'm oversimplifying big time, but at the same time, that's kind of the gist of it. And so John Paul II has a thing. I mean, he's got a lot. There's a lot of beautiful stuff, and I highly recommend looking into the theology of the body. Anybody who would really like to sink their teeth into the church's teaching on modesty and on human sexuality and stuff, because all of these things are kind of woven together here.
Right.
John Paul II, I think, is the great champion of our time on these topics. There have been many saints in the past who've addressed similar things as well, but John Paul II sort of brings together a kind of a system that talks about this stuff specifically. So he's got something that he calls the personalistic norm, where I mean, essentially, what are you doing? You're just as the catechism was getting at there earlier, you're trying to look at the dignity of the person, that very last line, respecting, awakening in them, those children and adolescents, a respect for the human person. Personalistic norm says, if I'm just looking at this person's body and um, I'm lusting after this body, in a sense, you might say that John Paul II's approach would be to say, someone who is revealing themselves, like revealing their bodies, dressing immodestly.
Right.
It's almost not that they're showing too much. I mean, you right. I'm just kind of throwing this out here as a way
Yeah.
of kind of thinking counter what you might expect. It's not that they're showing too much; they're not showing enough. They're not showing themselves, their dignity. They're letting people use them as objects. And this is big in John Paul II, and it's big in kind of the Catholic philosophical tradition as well. The difference between use, you know,
Right.
and true charity,
Hmm.
which is oriented to the good of the person and the recognition of the dignity of that individual. And so yeah, the personalistic norm, John Paul II, theology of the body, good stuff. But talking about the different approaches, so not so much like, this isn't so much like whether or not we think differently about it exactly. It's kind of how John Paul II takes the larger tradition of the church and makes it accessible. He uses the approach of phenomenology, which begins from that kind of experience of the person, and he kind of builds up from there, which essentially lets him talk about all the same stuff that the saints have been talking about from the beginning. But this way, it's sort of bringing it from a very tangible, like I can access this in a way that sometimes people who haven't studied Thomistic theology or something, sometimes some of the things that we throw out there might be a little harder to understand if you haven't studied in seminary, for instance. But John Paul II just kind of makes it real I was just about to say he makes it really easy, but then again, if you read his stuff,
Yeah, it's yep.
read Love and Responsibility sometime and tell me what you think, Billy.
Uh,
It's oh my
uh,
gosh, like at the same time, right? The phenomenological approach is doing this, and so I'm kind of oversimplifying a bit. If you actually try to read John Paul II, you kind of need to read Jason Everett, Christopher West. I mean, there's a whole bunch of guys who kind of take the theology of the body, the John Paul II stuff, and they break it down into simpler language. But
okay,
John Paul II stuff is extremely beautiful. There's a beautiful book by Edward Sri, who I'm not remembering the name of it off the top of my head, but that's another good. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm talking about John Paul II so much because I think he's the great champion of all of this for modesty and for human sexuality for our time. But I mean, you'll have other priests and bishops who will breach the subjects, the topics in different ways. But
okay,
what you should see from all of us consistently, or consistently across the board, is we all ought to be making appeal back to the source of Christian faith. We all ought to be making appeal back to the Lord Himself, to the Gospels, and to our Christian tradition, which is to say that regardless of how we go about it, the sources from which all of the stuff that we talk about ought to be the same. We ought to
right,
be focusing on the formation of virtue. We ought to be recognizing that if I'm dressing immodestly, I'm in a sense not respecting the dignity of my own body. Remember, the Lord told us, uh, what are the three greatest, what is the greatest
right,
of all the commandments? The one, He gave us a 3-for-1 deal, or
yep,
actually a 2-for-1 deal, but it's 3 levels of relationship. 2-for-1 deal. What is the greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. That's the first and the greatest commandment. He said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. 3 levels of relationship. You need to be able to love yourself and respect your own dignity if you're going to understand how to love your neighbor as they deserve to be loved. And if I'm not respecting my own body and I'm inviting other women to look at me and lust after me, or if I'm a woman and I'm inviting other men to look at me and lust after me, I'm not respecting my own dignity and I'm not loving them. Because what is it to love another person? I'm willing the good of the other person for that other person's own sake. Am I
right,
doing that if I'm dressing immodestly? I'm inviting them into a disorder, not to look at me with love. If just because I'm doing it for myself, that makes it okay, right? No, no, no. Jesus told me I'm supposed to love myself too. And I'm supposed to love you as I love myself. I'm not doing justice to you. I'm not doing justice to me or to him. If I'm engaging in this, I'm inviting all 3 of us into a disorder, you know?
right,
And that's not true love. That's not authentic friendship. That's surrender to the passions and the disorder. So
right.
yeah, that was maybe a little bit more long-winded than I should have gone with that one. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine.
Please.
Like you said, John Paul II has a lot of great stuff. I love reading his quotes. I read his quotes often about modesty and other stuff. I really enjoy him. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and like I say, and I think a lot of people get confused on this because, like you said, modesty and the sexual uh relations or whatever of it kind of all tie into one. So a lot of people do get confused with it.
Mhm.
So so the next question is, you kind of, I guess, touch on this a little briefly, I guess, but what are good examples of how of modest of not to be in modesty?
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I was studying abroad in Rome, the I think it was the Jesu, the Jesuit church on the Piazza. No, I don't remember. Anyway, it was one of the churches run by the Jesuits. It was the Jesu something, and they had one of those kind of the doorways that it has a couple doors. You go through
Yep.
the initial door, and then you get into this kind of little room that you have to go
Mm,
through another door to get into the actual church.
right.
And at the outside door, it had like these like cartoon drawings of like immodest dress with a big like X through them. um yeah, no, so what are good examples of dressing modestly? And I would say um, in light of all of the stuff that I've already mentioned with John Paul II and with the Catechism, and just thinking about the church's larger tradition, thinking about intention is actually really important. So like, what do I intend by this outfit? Does this set of clothing actually reflect my dignity and seek the good of another? If it's super thin and I'm just, the reason I particularly want to wear this shirt is because it fits super tight to my skin. And like I said, I've been working out all winter long, and I want everybody to see all of these bumps on my arm that are new muscles that have grown in over the winter and stuff. So like, what am I doing there? I'm basically putting on a shirt to invite people to stare at, this,
Right. Yep.
now, I mean, so there might be a kind of vanity in that, maybe a little bit of vanity. Um, if it's I'm talking about a guy in this instance, and what might it be for a woman? I mean, it could be the same, I guess, if you're working out, but sometimes for women, it might just be like a super low cut, or maybe the short jeans, or whatever you call
Mm.
them, short shorts,
Right.
whatever. So like, thinking about like, why why am I putting this on? um am I hoping to get some guy, maybe it's some guy in particular, maybe it's just guys in general, to turn and to take another look, to like whistle when I go by, or whatever they might do? um am I inviting somebody into an occasion of sin? I mean, am I actually thinking about that? Because what is going to be going on in his heart? What's going to be going on in her heart when they see, when they see this? Um, am I thinking about that? I think this is a great way to kind of keep in mind, keep a check on, how am I dressing? Maybe it's the, and doesn't necessarily need to be the color of clothing that I wear. It doesn't have to
Right.
be the material that I use or the style that I'm using. But what's going on in my heart? Even if I'm not consciously thinking about it in this moment, like, do I look through my closet and think, I've got this one because I want to be sexually appealing to somebody? Is that my motivation for having this set of clothing? If so, is that inviting somebody other than my spouse? For like, if I'm married or something like this, there's certain things that are appropriate between spouses that
Right.
aren't appropriate between you and anybody who's not your spouse. So for single guys or single girls, that is the case with everybody, right? Even if you're dating somebody, in fact, especially if you're dating somebody, you should be striving to seek the purity and the goodness of that particular person. So good examples would include anything that is motivated from the level of the heart for the authentic good of the other person, recognizing their dignity, for the authentic good of myself, recognizing my dignity, and then to just stop and ask, if you happen to be dressing in such a way that's inviting or encouraging people into occasions of sin, just to stop and ask yourself, why? Why am I doing this? Sometimes, and there's a lot of different potential reasons why that might be. Is
Right.
it because I don't love myself? Do I love myself? Do I recognize that I'm a person with dignity, worthy of being loved? Do I do I maybe thrive off of the attention and affection of others? Do I have this propensity to manipulate other people? I want him to be lusting after me. I want them to be lusting after me. I'm using real examples of potential things that might be going on in the heart, right?
Right.
And this is the crazy thing about this. Like, these are things that just as human beings we encounter in different ways. And so when you go through your closet, just think about, like, Lord, what's going on in my heart with each piece of clothing? For me, of course, it's pretty simple. I got,
Yeah.
I choose black or black or black. I don't like short sleeve shirts, so I just do long sleeve shirts, and um, I don't have to
Right.
worry too much about this for myself. But at the same time, like, yeah, praise God. The church makes it easy on priests, I guess. But and not just, take a step back, because looking at modesty not just as a kind of virtuous disposition with respect to human sexuality, but even taking a step back beyond that, when I think of modesty, like, what is this kind of clothing communicating? The Catechism referred to a whole bunch of different stuff earlier when I was reading through. I mean, reread through the Catechism section. There's a whole bunch of stuff to chew on that maybe we won't get into today. But yeah, actually, I'm just gonna jump back on topic because that's
Sure.
gonna take me down a rabbit hole. But um, what was I just saying now? The way that I dress. What is the way that I dress communicating to other people? The way that I dress, am I dressing in like hoodie and sweatpants and just baggy clothing? And I kind of go around with the hood up, the earbuds in, kind of walking through. I'm thinking of my college days.
Right.
I didn't actually do this because I was in seminary through my college time and stuff. So like, we were in khaki pants and button shirts and everything. But like so many of my classmates in different classes I had in school, they'd come in like that. One guy, God bless him, he was drinking almost every night before our morning Spanish class. And like he'd come in and his bloodshot eyes and stuff. It's just like, man, what are you doing to yourself? Uh, and it's interesting because like I and I'm not saying that the clothes makes the person or the clothes makes the disposition. It strikes me that like I think it's just kind of a reflection of where they're at this particular moment of their life's journey. Because
Sure.
like the dude who came in like all like bundled up in baggy clothes and stuff. I mean, the guy was like drinking early into the morning, and he just like he was really struggling through his time. And then I had another classmate who's just always like, the what do you call it, a blazer coat, blazer jacket or something
Right.
like
Yep.
that, suit coat or whatever, just like super dressed up. And I mean, wow, he's right. You don't want to judge a book by the cover, and I'm not actually trying to encourage anybody to be critical or to make assertions or assumptions about people based on this stuff. I'm just noting behaviors, I guess, and I'm thinking about
Right.
this in light of like how I dress. What is it communicating to me about myself? What is it communicating to other people about me as well? Um, Try not to turn that the other way around and make assumptions about people based on this. We kind of automatically do that on some level. I'm not trying to invite anybody to do that, but I'm trying to invite you the other way around, to
Right.
be thinking, what is what I'm wearing communicating to other people about who I am and about my take on them and stuff. So yeah,
Right.
anyway, maybe I better cut myself off there.
No, that sounds good. Really. So, guess like I guess you brought this up a couple of times away during our time together. Is that people don't really talk about it much. They don't really want to talk about it. So, but so why don't people like talking about it a lot? Because it's a really important topic.
Yeah. Well, um, it's one of the things where like I don't talk about too many of I don't talk about my experiences in this regard very often with the possibility of my mother ever hearing it, because she doesn't need to know what kinds of experiences I had when I was down in Venezuela, because mothers probably shouldn't know those things. But like I'm not saying things that I did, just things that I encountered when I was down there. Like
Right.
mothers worry a lot about us. Praise God, they love us so much. But
Yep.
I spent a summer in Venezuela. Maybe that's what I should have started with. I'm sorry. I spent a summer in Venezuela. And so while I was down there, this is one of the things that struck me so much when I was down there. It could have just been the parts of Venezuela I was in, but it
Sure.
just I was so saddened like by the culture experience. I mean, a lot of things. The people going through this tremendous sense of anxiety is not the right word, more like a fear, trepidation. One of the priests I stayed with there was saying it was insecurity is as if that was a verb. Um,
Mm.
is kind of the feeling that people have. So there's a lot of that going on, but specifically with respect to modesty, I mean, oh my goodness, you hop in a car and you drive around the billboards. I mean, it's almost pornographic, just stuff that you're just seeing everywhere. It's like, wow, at a certain point, it's just kind of becoming background noise. And just like, and it's a warmer climate than
Right.
Minnesota is, to be fair, but there's a lot of immodesty and there's a lot of broken families. I often encountered families where the family structure was mom, kids, mom, kids, mom, kids. And in many cases, the kids in the family have different dads. And it was just so sad. And I just keep thinking about this, like so many girls I met, praise God, it's not everybody. I met some beautiful, beautiful families down there, beautiful family life as well. But so way too many times I met these families where it was just broken and wounded. And it was just like, um, what am I getting at with this? I'm sorry. I'm going down a rabbit hole. I So why don't people like talking about modesty? I think the more and more prevalent it gets, the
Mm,
more and more we kind of assume this is kind of a normal thing. And like Venezuela, they're way past it being normal. It's like, oh my goodness. If you want to talk about modesty, man, you're just a prude. You're like, I mean, where is this? Where does this conversation belong? Go back to the church, you know. No, but this isn't just something that we should be talking about at the church. Like this is something that we should be striving to safeguard our hearts
exactly.
and one another. Like I mean, the stuff that we talked about earlier. If I'm really loving another person in my life, I'm seeking for them what's truly good for them. I shouldn't want them to be objectified, treated like an object for the lust of another. You know, that's what's happening when we're not being modest. We're putting ourselves forth, or others are putting themselves forth as objects for lust. That doesn't respect the dignity of the person. And
Nope.
so why don't we like talking about it? The more and more we treat this as normal, the more and more old fashioned isn't quite the right word, prudish is kind of the right word, but um, the more and more like, I don't know, stuck up or something. I'm not thinking of the right words for this, but like
Yeah.
it feels like you're just not with the times, man. I
Okay.
mean, this is just it's it's uh it's unfortunate, but I think the reality of it is we have a sense of guilt when we know that we are complicit, or even in directly engaged ourselves in a particular kind of sinful behavior. And like as a culture, we've been moving in this direction for a long time now. And so like as a culture, we're kind of bought in on this as kind of a normal thing.
Yep.
How many movies have scenes of people sleeping together, or at very least the kind of implication that this is going on? um I mean, it's sad. It's
It
sad. there's
is.
there's a growing expectation that we would essentially move in the direction of the Venezuelan culture that I was describing before. I mean, this is the momentum we're pushing ourselves into. And it was so sad. Like it brought me to tears so many times that summer. It's like, how can this, like, how can everybody just be okay with, I mean, families that I met, young girls, 16-year-old girls are dressing like, I mean, they fully intend and expect that their lives are going to be like the lives of their moms. And normally I would say beautiful. I mean, that's great. But in this particular case, that means, what I mean by that is they fully expect to essentially have men lusting over them, having different dads for their kids, be with a guy for a while, you know, he'll leave me, I'll leave him, whatever, however that works out, I'll be with a new guy, you know.
Right.
There's no commitment to this relationship, no reciprocity to love. You know, John Paul II, that whole theology of the body stuff, it's oriented to this giving an exchange of personal love, the reciprocity of love, the recognition of the dignity of the other person, and within the sacrament of marriage, the total self-giving of myself, and in within the sacramental bond, and the reciprocating of that from the sake of the other. that doesn't happen when we're just lusting after each other, when we're treating each other as objects. We have to first begin from the starting place of the recognition of human dignity and build off from there. And but it's really uncomfortable, I think. I'm sorry, this is a long-winded answer.
Uh,
The short answer is it's the more complicit we are in kind of just yielding to the momentum of the culture, the more and more difficult and uncomfortable it is to address it, for us personally, but also to allow other people to lecture us about it. We don't feel that you have that little voice of conscience, which at first kind of pricks and says, like, he's right, he's right, But then the fact that you can feel that little voice of conscience in the back of your heart, in the back of your mind, itself becomes something that makes you agitated and sort of, I think, feeds the emotively vicious, in a sense, response that
right.
sometimes you'll get from people if you try to encourage them in this direction. So in a sense, I guess, try to be patient with people when you encounter this kind of a disposition, because I think in a sense they're going through this interior, even if they don't recognize it themselves, they're going through this interior struggle. They don't recognize it yet, but they're yielding the battle and losing ground on it within their own hearts. So
Right.
I think that's why it's hard to talk about. I mean, that's part of it. I'm
Yeah.
abstracting, I guess, a bit. There's more that could be said, but yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I think part of it too is that people might not really want to know the truth about it. Like you said, Venezuela has really gone deep into that. So they don't want to know the truth about it, or they just, like you said, they think that, what are you talking about? This is normal. So, yeah. Um, so what can we do as Catholics to bring, and just as people, to bring awareness to others that we don't go down the same road as Venezuela does, and have a have a good conversation to people about it.
So I honestly did not mean to throw Venezuela under the bus here. I'm just kind of sharing one of my experiences from the past.
Right.
um, but there's a lot of really beautiful. So this is my little disclaimer here. There's a lot of very beautiful and wonderful people that I met down in Venezuela, and their culture. This is a comment. It's meant to be a commentary on the cultural experience that I had down there.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so how can we grow that awareness? How can we kind of push against the momentum of our time? I think the best thing to do, in a sense, it's not like you're going to be able. Not, take a step back again. None of us is the Messiah. Praise God. If everybody was depending on me to save them, I would just say, sorry guys, give up hope now. There's no way I can save you all.
Oh,
Praise God. Praise God. That it's a beautiful thing, because Jesus Christ is the Lord. He's the Messiah. Um, that being said, right? What can I do? So I can't overcome the darkness. I can't do it all myself, but there are concrete things that I can do. The first and most important thing to begin with is focus on the formation of virtue across the board, all virtue, which needs to have at its core, as Paul says, charity, caritas.
right.
Without, I think the way it's usually translated into English is, love. Love is faith, hope, and love remain, but the greatest of these is love. Love is patient, love is kind. All of that stuff, right?
Right.
True charity needs to be at the center of my formation of virtue. It is itself a virtue, like the great virtue. So charity needs to be at the heart, and right. So that's also going to affect the way that I think about this. Right. I'm going to start thinking not just about wanting to show off my muscles or something like that, which I was not talking about myself, as you can see.
Right.
I was just abstracting what this might be like. No, but to really focus on the formation of virtue. So like the virtue of chastity, for instance, is directly charity as well, but chastity is kind of uniquely focusing within the heart of this modesty question, as the Catechism referred to temperance as well. But really, all of the virtues, like, what can I do to help this? form virtue within your life. And within that context, Jesus says, love your neighbor as you love yourself, right? If I'm seeking for myself what is truly good for me, I'm forming virtue within my life. I need to be helping other people to form virtue in their lives. This is the great foundation stone. If I was to say nothing else, that would be the big thing, right?
Right.
And it's the cool thing is it's the same across the board for every other thing, like form virtue in your life. For every other topic we might cover, I think this is going to be a great starting point. Beyond that, go through your wardrobe and do that discernment of heart that I just mentioned before. You know, you're kind of like how you do an examination of conscience
Yep.
before you receive the sacrament of reconciliation. And I even recommend to people trying to do an examination of conscience at the end of the day, part of your
Right.
daily prayer, like right before you go to bed, to just do a little examine then. Do a little examination of the heart in your closet and just go through like why this dress, why this suit, why these, you know, pants or these shoes, or, you know, how short are these shorts and why do I have them? I think that would be a really great, right? The starting point
Right.
is virtue, but this is maybe an easier place to kind of see some tangible, like something that I can do. Um, Beyond that, you know, hopefully everybody's taking time to pray every single day. And in your daily prayer, if you discover that modesty is one of the ways that the enemy attacks you, he's recognized that there's certain patterns of behavior in your life that like you've given in to this temptation to be immodest in the past, and it's, like I said, formed a habit, then definitely put this into your daily prayer. Lord, help me, please help me. Find a patron saint for your like the struggle with modesty that you can turn to. Saint Michael's always a great saint for the struggle against evil. So if you would just want to like kick some bottom,
Right.
you can go straight to Saint Michael. Our Lady, tremendous witness of purity and holiness, like another powerhouse, right? In fact, like she's the powerhouse after the Lord himself. Obviously, like the Lord himself, Jesus loves you so much. He's going to be always a good resource to turn to, not just a resource, the source,
That's source. Yeah.
from which we draw strength. And I think in particular, this is another thing that I think. Well, Psalm 51,
Yep.
Psalm
That's a good
51.
one.
So it's a beautiful psalm, and it's talking about David, right? So David has this moment where he gives in to lust, and he's like reflecting on. I mean, it's kind of like the prayer of a man who's turned his heart back to the Lord after having given in to lust. And so, beautiful psalm from David. You can't see this, but this is the foot of Jesus on the cross here, and like the scene of the crucifixion is right above my head here. But you know, if you've got a crucifix, if you're struggling with modesty, with chastity, the virtue of chastity in particular, pull out a crucifix sometime and just like stare, you know, hold the crucifix in your hand and just stare at it, and just think like, Lord, look what you've done for me, look what you've done for love of me. And you know, just maybe spend a little time just opening your heart to the Lord, and just having this image of the cross, this image of his love for us, kind of right there before you, staring you in the eyes. So
Right.
yeah, but beyond that, yeah, just when you get dressed, you know, after you've done all of those other things, when you get dressed, just to think, like actively be thinking like, you know, what am I trying to communicate with this, and what are some ways that I can try to maybe, you know, just in the back of your mind, what are some ways that I can try to affirm the good in others, the dignity of others throughout the course of my day? Um, if it's, you know, if it's a close friend or family member with whom you have a close connection, then maybe you'll be able to challenge them if you see them dressed immodestly, like, hey, you know, what's going on? What's going on? Like why? I mean, this has to be tailored to your particular relationship with them, but like, I mean, are you struggling with like something within your heart, like what, why are you, just trying to think of a way.
Right.
I don't want
Right.
this to be used as an example that would actually be used. But, oh, Father Gabriel said I should say this to you. uh, but like, to be able to just give a loving challenge to somebody like that recognizes like, okay, if they're dressing in this way after having just kind of gone over all of these different things, why are you dressing this way? What is going on within your heart, right? Talking to this other person with whom you're lovingly challenging, or to whom you're lovingly challenging,
Mhm.
and what's going on in your heart, and can I help you? I mean, can I help you to can we talk about this or whatever? um if it's a family member, a close friend or something, that might be a beautiful conversation you can have with them. If it's a complete stranger, you're going to go a little bit more on the surface level probably.
Right.
um maybe just a simple, I mean, quite frankly, there's a beautiful story actually, and I can't remember his name, the guy's name that's involved in this, but there's and I don't remember if it was Jason Everett or one of those guys had told this story. There's this prostitute woman who's like walking down the street, and like, I don't remember the exact details, but there's like these three bishops or something walking this way. So the prostitutes come in, and the bishops, they turn away their faces because, modesty says that I shouldn't be looking at, I need to make sure that I'm not looking at a woman with lust. One
Right.
of the bishops didn't turn away. He continued to look at this woman, but he looked at her not from like a starting place in his heart of lust. He actually looked at her. If you can imagine what the expression difference is here, you've got the lust where you're just exciting like your own body, like you're getting. He looked at her with pity, with sorrow, and as she's walking by, the other bishops turn away. This bishop is looking at her with love and pity, like genuine, the self-giving kind of love
Right.
and pity and sorrow. And like, she walks by and she herself goes on to just like sob and just be like, I've never had a man look at me like that before. It's like they've always been looking at me as an object for their gratification. And this leads to a little conversion, not a little conversion, a big conversion in her life. I think of Mary Magdalene, or anyway, I'm not gonna go down those rabbit holes. I'm sorry, but no, this is just a story of like how something as simple as a look was able to communicate something. Now, that being said, what you need to recognize as well is, what are the limitations of my heart and the formation of my virtue? Do I need to be the bishop who turns his eyes? Am I going to be looking at this woman with lust if I look at her? Um, Maybe closing my eyes is the right response. Not if I'm driving, maybe, but
Right.
if I'm in that scenario that I just described, I need to be a good steward over my own heart as well. But are there ways in which I can make sure that I'm recognizing the dignity of this person, even if they're not recognizing their own dignity, even if they're dressing immodestly? You know, you might want to take a second look. That might be the active impulse, the instinctive response. Well, that might be exactly what I need to not do if I'm going to
Right.
respect that person's dignity. Staring at them from across the way, if they're dressed immodestly and just kind of like looking their body up and down and stuff, is that respecting her dignity? It's not.
No.
So, just kind of thinking about those things too, and like realizing that I'm communicating something by how I respond as well. Um, I think all of those are things to consider with it. But
Right.
um, before, I wasn't trying to give a script for how you would address your sister or your your best friend, or your best friend or something who's so right. You have to kind of tailor however you would respond to an individual person
Right.
according to your relationship with that person. So yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. And w- like you say, if you're struggling with it in your own life, pray about it. One of my Father Mike Schmidt's really like him. One of his quotes is, "Nothing is wasting when giving it to God." So
Mm.
here's our thing. So pray about it, and yeah. So
Yeah.
is there
Father
anything
Mike
else?
is Father Mike's a smart guy. I mean, he's a good speaker. He's able to
Right.
put things, and yeah, so that's beautiful. It's beautiful.
that's my go-to quote for him. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um, is there anything else that you would like to tell our audience before we end the show today?
Um, Seek always to love the Lord with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, that you might love your neighbor as you love yourself. I really hope that you are able to draw strength from the Lord and be aided in your journey through through conversation here with Mr. Saber at Catholic Table Talk. And God bless you and have a wonderful day.
Yeah, well, thank you, Father, very much for coming on. Also, if you see Father's masses, homilies, go to his YouTube page, Father Gabriel at St. Michael's and Sacred Heart. Is that correct? Um,
Father Gabriel of Sacred Heart and St.
oh,
Michael's. I think it's something like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, so he has really good homilies. Go check him out. So, but
Praise God.
for Father, so thank you again, Father, for coming on and talking about it. So,
Awesome. You're very welcome. Thank you, Billy.
and for everyone else, we'll see you next time at the table where everything Catholic is on the table at Catholic Table Talk.